Yeah, it's until we're just it's the giant something. Yeah, it's that next time I'm good for next week. She got it all solved. Yeah. We feel like her, yeah, but some it's very long. Yeah, like we don't know. Yeah, and then she like the irons. Right, so the wedding, it's like it's. If Megan look back, when does Mark's village trustee term expire? You know, like in 2028, you know when that expired? So you, yeah, it feels, it's not my. But well, given somebody, it's gonna be like some motion I'm gonna make, so you check me real quick. 20 minutes. Please, I'm sorry, you should have asked earlier. Yeah. So. That's.
April 18th.
April 18th, 2028.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So I don't need that the number of it's voice.
Okay, we ready now? Okay, I call this special village board meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic of kings, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Mike here. He's in Tennessee.
He's excused. He's in Tennessee, he's excused.
Okay. Okay, let's do roll call. Trustee Lancaster here. Trustee Brett Myers excused. Trustee Van Hefty here. Village president's here. Trustee Field here. Trustee Baldwin
Here.
Jim. Jim. Here. Well, he got sworn in and everything. Well, there you go.
Well, welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Now we have a full complement. Now I might speak. Next up is potential conflicts of interest and calling those out. Any conflicts of interest, anything on the board agenda? There being none, correspondence or communication from board and staff. Is there any communication from the board or staff? There being none, next up is public.
I do actually. I'll make it quick.
Trustee Lancaster.
So, Chad's working on this, doing what he can, but I thought this was important enough to alert the board because it happened again today. We have a serious safety issue with the fire department and with the paging from the county. Bring this up to you guys as a board in case you happen to run into any of your county representatives. Maybe worth mentioning, also depending on what Chad finds out. Maybe some part of the board to go back to the county to put some pressure on the county. This has been going on. We've had some ongoing radio issues for quite some time, but they've gotten significantly worse probably in the last month, I would say. So I'm just gonna play one for you real quick, just so you understand. This is a page we got. This is how our pages are coming off for our fires right now.
Why?
So what are we going to? Who's in trouble? Who needs help? It's very disturbing to me, to say the least. Very disturbing. So thank you.
So just so the board knows, I'm meeting with the sheriff and the deputy chief tomorrow. To find out what their side of the story is, and I said that I would like to get it resolved at their level without having to go to the county board level. With it, but yes, it definitely is a health and safety issue, and we can see it here because we can't hear a lot of the pages either, so it's just not those mobile things, it's the radio system we have here as well. So I intend to have an update for the board when we meet next week.
And I appreciate what you're doing, Chad. I just. So it happened again today. I just wanted to know what thing.
Public comments. Board will receive information from, first off, is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak? I know nobody signed up. There being none signed up to speak. We'll just move to item 7, which is appointments. Which is 7A. Appoint trustee to the planning commission for a 1-year term. On that, I think we'll take nominations and we'll make a vote. Just Wall,
I would like to nominate Mark Van Hefty for the position of trustee.
trustee Lancaster,
I nominate him as well, if one to accept and keep doing it, so a lot of knowledge.
so you second the motion.
Are we nominating or motion or what are we
I
doing?
just nominated.
Oh, nomination.
So, yeah,
So we got 2 nominations for trustee Van Hefty. Any other nominations? Okay, let's make a motion and a second. We can,
I'll make a motion to nominate Mark Van Hefty for the position of planning commission. Which expires on April 19th, 2027. Beginning April 21st, 2026.
take a second.
Are you sure here?
Yeah, you can. So trustee Field,
I'll second.
so we got a motion by trustee Baldwin and a second by trustee Field. Any discussion on the appointment for Mark Van Hefty to the planning commission? There being none, oh. We submitted again. Trustee Lancaster,
so seeing that. Trustee Van Hefty was just reelected to a 2-year term. And because the way these appointments expire, we end up having to call special board meetings a week earlier. I would actually like to see if he's willing to serve. That trustee Van Hefty's term goes for his full 2-year. Term of being on the board. So with that being said, I want to make an amendment to.
can we do that? Okay,
I'm gonna make an amendment to appoint trustee Mark Van Hefty to the planning commission to a term expiring. To coincide with his village board term, which would be April 18th, 2028.
so we have a motion to amend. To make it a 2-year term versus a 1-year term. Trustee Baldwin.
Should I have a question on this? Maybe we should wait for a second.
Yeah, we gotta wait a second. Trustee Dan.
I'll second that.
So we got a motion and a second to amend the original motion. The amendment is to make the term a 2-year term. Any discussion?
Under discussion, although I appreciate what you're trying to do, I don't think the ordinance allows it. I think the ordinance that the board recently approved last year with changing the composition of the planning commission had the trustee as a 1-year term.
Can we pull it up quick by chance?
Sure.
Sorry.
We can find out first. The reasons on.
I thought we had some leeway, but.
I think it's a.
Consecutive 1-year terms.
Right, you can see it.
It says in. It says in section 2, 123. Number letter C, a village trustee shall be appointed by the village president and approved by the majority vote of the first meeting of the village board held after the spring election, and so shall serve for a 1-year term.
So that being said, I don't think we should make a vote on that. So on a point of order where you scratch that amendment, because you'd have to change the ordinance. first before we
That
get.
is correct. Okay.
So. Can you make it this, you wanna withdraw your amendment?
Sure, I'll ask, we'll have to look at that ordinance later, sure.
Okay. And you'll withdraw your second. Okay, so the motion's on the table to appoint Mark Van Hefty to a one-year term expiring in April 18, 2027. Any other discussion?
One follow-up question for Chad, I guess. Knowing that he's here for 2 years, would we be able to like reappoint him at our March board meeting then or something that we're not going to call special meeting in April 2027?
I would believe so since he's done for election at that point.
Okay, so that would solve, it's much worth having a special meeting to, just for this one item usually. It just happens we're working with the planning commission tonight, but that's not normal. Just. Thanks.
There being no further discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against? And the board unanimously approves trustee Van Hefty to the plan commission for a one-year term ending in April 2027. Next up is adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
We have a motion by trustee Lancaster and a second by trustee Van Hefty to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Right? This special board meeting is adjourned.
So now we would ask the planning commission to go and find your seat. So, yeah.
All right. We're gonna kick her into gear.
Yeah, both of the groups will have to call the meeting starter.
Gotcha. It being 5:45, we're gonna go ahead and call this special joint meeting of the village board and the plan commission to order.
Can I still point of order? It's my understanding that for joint meetings, the highest ranking official can chair the whole meeting, it just need to be co-chaired. Do I have a wrong interpretation of that?
I have no idea. In the meetings I participated in previously was always both boards would call or people told their respective boards to order. I guess we can look into that, but maybe for this one, if you would just follow that, calling your board order and we'll see for the future, because we may have another one of these.
Okay. So I call to order the April 21st, 2026 Plan Commission meeting that is being held joint with the village board.
All right, let's please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
And first we'll call the village board. We'll call trustee Lancaster, present. Trustee Meyer is excused, trustee Van Hefty here. Those presidents here, trustee Deal here. Trustee Nolan
Here.
and trustee Rhino here. Okay. All right, so the village board is called to order. We do have a quorum. Do you follow your thing together?
Under joint agenda. So roll call for the plan commission. Commissioner S. Apex. Commissioner Schumacher,
Here.
Commissioner Perschbacher.
Here.
Commissioner Linsmeyer.
Here.
Commissioner Egbrook.
Here. These are some motley last names.
Trustee Bennett.
Oh, Trustee Van Hefty.
All right, next on the agenda would be the potential conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest on any of the agenda items for the joint meeting? Okay, there being none, new business, the zoning code modernization SRF consulting will go ahead and lead the discussion.
Good evening, everyone.
Hit the person button. Can you try the public mic?
Okay, there you
There
go.
we go. Good evening, everyone. Now we're working. Thank you all for having me tonight. Appreciate being able to get a joint meeting here together. My name is Mitch Browse. I am a planner with SRF Consulting Group. We are working on this project with the village out of our Madison office, and so I had a nice drive up here this evening. And we're working with Chad and Josh very closely over the last about 8 months to kind of get to this point in the project. Previously, we did assist with some of the updates to the comprehensive plan, and so we're very happy to continue the work we've been doing within the village of Pearson. We shared some updates with the board, with the village board in January. We've made some further progress since then and just wanted to really spend some time to kind of dig in on the overall structure of the zoning ordinance, primarily with focus on residential zoning, because that's where it feels like there's the most kind of important focus on. So certainly we'll introduce our commercial and industrial type of zoning as well. But the majority of this conversation, we're kind of focusing on how we are proposing to structure the residential zoning districts for the village of Harrison. So I'm going to give a quick update. I'm going to then talk a little bit about some of the progress we made, and we'll dive into the structural changes. I will have a few questions that I'm going to ask the board and the planning commission along the way. But certainly if there's questions for me or comments or just discussion points that anyone would like to dig into, please let the president know, and we can pause and kind of dig into that as is appropriate. And then the last thing to do is we'll just talk a little bit about next steps, schedule, what we can kind of expect to see here moving forward. And so, as I know all of you are familiar with, we do like to kind of start all of these presentations with an overview of, why we're here today. We're here again to update the Village of Harrison zoning code. We want to achieve a number of kind of key objectives, including modernization. But we also want to update the code as kind of required by state law. And so state law does require every community that has zoning to have that zoning be consistent with your comprehensive plan. Those zoning standards are not so much kind of forward looking, but they're the actual laws that regulate how land can be used and developed within the community. And so, within Harrison, kind of building from what we have with the comprehensive plan, we've kind of set out a number of goals that we'd like to focus on as we move through this process. We talked with the board and with staff early on, and then we pulled them out of the comprehensive plan update. So some of those goals are, again, we want to implement the direction that the comprehensive plan has given the village through things like promoting and allowing greater use or greater agritourism type uses out in the rural areas. We want to make sure that we're preserving the agricultural land that the village has and focusing growth in the area of the community that's already urbanized. We want to maintain our existing historic nature that the village of Harrison is. I know there's been a lot of change over the last 10 years here, and so certainly thinking about what type of community and character the community wants to have moving forward. And then we want to look to create a plan that promotes economic development to the best that we can by kind of diversifying the types of land uses, maybe making standards a little bit more flexible in certain areas, and then also just allowing people, especially in rural parcels, to do a little bit more type of business type of activities and value added activities on kind of agricultural parcels. And then the last thing, as you would have seen in our agenda item, there's a lot of work that can be done to modernize the code, update terminology, reduce the amount of words to make the code a little bit easier to use, make it a little bit more user friendly, both for staff and for the commission and the board of trustees, but also for the public, just try to make it a little bit more understandable. And so with all of those things in mind, we've gone through what is kind of a 4-phase process. We're kind of in the middle of the 3rd phase at this point. We initially did kind of a diagnostic review of the zoning ordinance with consideration of what the comprehensive plan says. We worked with Chad and Josh on that. We've developed a structure that we presented to the village board earlier this year. And then now we're actually putting the code language and the details behind what that structure says, so that we're actually building out what is a code that can be adopted and can be utilized by the village. And then once we get to the end of that, then we'll move on to kind of refinement adoption to make sure that we are giving the village the best code that you can have to do achieve your goals. So the first thing I do want to do is just talk a little bit on a high levels, the districts that we're recommending be included within the new code. We've kind of pooled it into rural and residential zones, and then your more commercial and business types of zones. And so again, most of our focus is going to be on those suburban residential zones today, because that's where we're seeing maybe not the most change, but the most focus in the type of development that we expect to see in the village moving forward. And so current zoning code has an ag district, it has a rural residential district. We are recommending that that kind of structure maintains and moves forward. Obviously, there's a significant portion, more than 50% of the village. It's an agricultural, identified as an agricultural land use in the future land use map. We want to make sure that so we want to maintain our rural-based zoning in those areas, which is consistent with what we have on a future land use plan. One of the things we are looking to do is incorporate more economic development type activities that can occur in some of those areas. And so additional permitting process to allow agritourism type of activities. We have a lot of sheds in the rural community that can be used for contractor sheds where people can run their contract business out of their property, and it's very limited impact to neighboring properties. And so we want to try to encourage and allow that to the best extent. And so we're looking to add some additional permitting, and we'll dig into a little, but just to add a little bit more flexibility to how people are able to use their rural rights. The largest change, or some of the more kind of important changes that we're proposing, is going from what is currently 4 residential zoning districts in the urbanized portion of the village down to 3. What we're kind of recommending is a structure that's very consistent with what's on the future land use map. So low density residential zoning district, that's going to be your primarily your exclusively single family type of zoning. And R2 district, which is a medium density residential district, which kind of it incorporates what is and the higher density residential zoning district that the village currently has. And then R3, which would be a high density, which would be carrying over from the multiple family residential zoning district that's currently within the code. And so one of the reasons why we're moving away from that naming convention that we have in the current code is we do have a little bit more flexibility as to the types of uses, types of housing that can occur in each of these districts. And so by calling it 2-family residential, what we're really saying is you can only put duplexes or attached single family homes in those areas. And so we want to build a little bit more flexibility, and you'll see here shortly as to what I'm talking about there. And so we'll start by just looking at our low density residential. I understand this isn't super clear, but I did want to just provide some kind of key information as to what type of density we would be allowing within this zoning district. Like I said, this is primarily your RS1 district currently, but it does have a kind of a little bit of RS2 in it as well, and so it's a little bit of a mix. And so current RS1 zoning district allows lots as small as 12,000 square feet. What that adds up to is then 3.6 units per acre, and I'll give you a picture of what that actually looks like on the ground here shortly. What we are recommending is that R1 low density district allows only single family dwellings. with some limited accessory dwelling units, which we could certainly dig into if the group would like to. A 12,000 square foot minimum lot size, which is consistent with the RS1, and again, that corresponds to then up to 3.6 units per acre. We've gone back and forth with staff whether or not this should go as low as the existing RS2 zoning district, which is down to 7,500 square feet per acre. But ultimately, you know, in talking with staff, the recommendation is that we stay at that 12,000 square feet for this R1 zoning district. And again, this will be only single family dwellings with some allowance of accessory dwelling units. And so what that actually looks like in practice is we have kind of a full block, I guess you could call it here, about 160 acres in between, you know, Manitowoc Road on the south, Co-op Road on the west. Within that, we have 330 total lots. These lots range from 13,000 square feet, so about a third of an acre, all the way up to 25,000 square feet, excuse me, which is a little bit over a half of an acre. Those larger lots are the ones that kind of land in the corners. And so just because of the odd shape that you get when you have corner lots, you end up with slightly larger lots because they're kind of triangular shaped. But on average, lots land around 15,000 square feet. So that's pretty consistent with that 12,000 square foot minimum we've identified with the zoning district. And so this is the type of development we can expect to see within that zoning district. Kind of a mix of between a third and a half acre type of lots. That overall density calculations I included, you know, the 0.48 units per acre does include the road network as part of that calculus. So you to take out some of the, if you take out the roads, then the lot, you know, density technically it's a little bit higher, but we do include that kind of infrastructure and the density calculations you're looking at. And so if we jump over to our R2 and R3 zoning districts, again, we're looking at medium density and high density. We're talking high density that is consistent with what we have with Harrison. We're not talking high density that we would see in, say, Appleton or in Madison. You know, these are, all of these terms are meant to be, you know, construed within the existing character of the village of Harrison. And so our R2 district is kind of like a mix of the RS2 district and the two family, the RT district is 2 family dwellings. What would be allowed within that district is single family dwelling units, allowing accessory dwelling units, 2 family homes, so duplexes, and then townhomes up to 3 units in a building. So we're not talking 4, we're not talking any more now, just be up to 3 units. And so, and within each of those, we have kind of different density standards. But what that would come out to is somewhere in the range of, you know, 5.8 to 10.9 units per acre. With duplexes, we'd allow, you know, 8,000 square foot lots on the minimum, 4,000 square feet per unit, going up to 12,000 square feet for single family dwelling units. So again, a slightly higher level of density than we have within the R1 district, but still kind of consistent with what we see ranging between that RS2 district currently and the 2 family district. We've just kind of combined it and allowed a little bit more flexibility. So we're not having such, we can have kind of more of a diverse range of uses. And so before I look at multiple family dwelling, you want to jump to the next slide and just look at a couple examples of what this would look like in the village of Harrison. And so we have kind of 2 examples. Both of them happen to be directly adjacent to the elementary schools. One on your left is along Spring Valley Road. It's adjacent to Woodland Elementary. This is a good example of what would look like if we have a mix of duplexes and single family homes as allowed within that R2 district. Along that road, at least the portion that I've boxed out there, there's more there. We have 10 duplexes, so 20 units. We have 12 single family dwellings, 12 units. If we do the math, that comes up to about 4.1 units per acre. So again, slightly more than what we'd see in our R1 district, but still pretty appropriate within the village of Harrison. If we jump over to the one on the right, that's Skipper's Lane, which is just across from Sunrise Elementary. Very similar, except for all of those units are duplexes, 12 duplexes, 24 units. Looking at about 5 units per acre, so slightly more density. But again, still within that appropriate range, when we saw centers. And that is the type of development we would envision within that R2 district. Kind of a mix of those single family uses with some townhomes and duplexes mixed in a little bit here. Any questions so far?
What are the current lot requirements on Skipper Lane as an example? Are those the 8,000 square foot lot minimums, or are those larger lots?
Yeah, so that's gonna fall into the RT district, the two family, and so the current standards are between 6,000 and 10,000 square feet per dwelling, which corresponds to like 4.4 to 7.2 units per acre.
So the new proposal would have less square feet per dwelling. You have it at 4,000 to 8,000, and it's 6,000 to 10,000 now. So you would be cutting down the size of those multifamily lots.
Yeah, this would be slightly less than what we have currently, or slightly
A third less.
on the low end, yeah. Yeah, and this is part of the conversation we wanna have.
Good question.
I did. I'm a proponent of senior housing, and anyone's spoken about this before. Should there at some point be some enthusiasm on the board to invest in some senior housing somewhere along the line? Where would that fit in this current structure?
So there's a few places that might fit. We have the multifamily zoning district, which allows some higher densities, some more multifamily. One of the things we talked about with Chad and Josh is when we have these higher density uses that are in the best interest of the village to pursue, we also can use our planned development districts to essentially design a zoning district that's appropriate for that type of use. And so there'd be a few mechanisms to do it. But if someone wanted to build a slightly higher density senior housing unit, and the plan commission felt like that was a good thing for the village, you'd work with that developer to essentially design a zoning district that is appropriate to accommodate those types of uses and also kind of reflects the underlying character of the community.
And it wouldn't necessarily need to be an apartment building, it could be independent,
Yeah.
individual living condos for independent living, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
definitely. Yeah. Anything else? So next thing we'll do is just jump onto the multifamily residential. Looking at, pretty similar standards. We're looking at slightly different ways that we're measuring this, but essentially we're looking at the same maximum density. So up to 15 units per acre is allowed currently within the RM district. And that's what would be allowed within the R3 district. So again, the same level of density, the same types of housing allowed. And a lot of that would be to incorporate or allow for the uses that are already there. There's very little land in the village on the future land use plan that's identified as high density that is not developed. So most of that land that was identified when the comp plan was amended for that use has already been developed, and so it's kind of consistent with existing uses. And so just to jump and kind of give the kind of best example or an couple examples of what that would look like. In Harrison, we have the Miragio apartments, which are just south of Midway. You can see Lake Park Road here on the far right. The Miragio apartments have 6 buildings that have 14 units, 6 buildings that have 10 units. In total, that's 144 units. There's about 17 and a half acres there. If you count just the portion of the property that's developed. And so that comes out 8.2 units per acre. So right kind of in the middle of that multifamily allowance. If we jump over kind of to the north and the west along Lake Park Road there and north of Midway, we're looking at Novella apartments. That's 21 buildings. They have 8 units per building. Again, that's about 168 total, and that's again the same exact density that we saw essentially in the Miragio, about 2 units per acre. And so that's the kind of multifamily development that would be allowed within the RM district as it's kind of mapped out today. Any questions? Is there general agreements on density standards as identified? We tried to be somewhat consistent with what we have within our existing code, reflect the updates to the comprehensive plan. And just kind of simplify things a little bit for staff when they're looking at that.
I guess to. Tammy's question, why did we decide place to yes. If the whole purpose of this was to keep the rural feel and have using the RS. Funding third, certainly funding third though.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, I mean, it's intended to be a mix of those uses, and so. We're looking at. You know, essentially, we're looking at 8,000 square feet per lot if you're looking at a duplex, which is, you know, fairly consistent with what we have. And so we're looking at slightly higher density than is allowed, but still reasonably within the range that we have within our existing code. And so the best place to kind of look here is our density thresholds. And so right now within the RS2 and RT district, we have 3.6 up to 7.2. And then this would be 5.9 to 10.9. So slightly higher density, but not a, you know, a third. And certainly we can talk about changing that. I think what we were trying to do is align it with that medium density district. That's,
I mean, I get that you're gonna put these probably as a buffer between commercial and residential. That's primary use that we're looking at, but. It's just.
I think because you also know if you give the developer an option of going to 4,000 per unit versus 6,000 per unit, they're not going to 6,000 when they can turn a better profit on going to 4,000. So my question would be, why weren't these reduced square footage proposals presented when we did the amended comprehensive plan not too long ago? That would have been an ideal time to make adjustments because the board as well as the planning commission voted on a comprehensive plan based on what was outlined at that time.
But these specifics are ironed out in
Just, you know,
these specifics are ironed out at the comprehensive plan level, that's a higher level. This zoning code is where this is, and this is, we can change whatever, you know, if the boards feel that this needs to be looked at, we're at the point of making changes to it. It's not in stone, it's not been adopted, this is the first discussion.
Yeah.
we're asking questions.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, it's, you know, again, it's just a proposal and we're interested to hear feedback. That's why we're here. You know, this isn't anywhere near done.
Tom, you wanna hit the?
Yeah, I think, just, I mean, when we talk about this, we still have a percentage of lot coverage maximum for buildings. So, I mean, 4,000 square feet, and when we have for lot coverage, you know, full coverage, 25 or 30.
Yeah, but the plan's looking at rates.
130. So, you know, it's, you can't build much on 4,000 square feet. So I think that alone, you know, either you build a big apartment, which they're again a little, you know, a little lower rent, you know, but it also, like you said, it's gonna be up to the developer to what they want to see as far as that goes. I
It's
also,
gonna be up to the planning commission and the board will see.
well, no, but I mean, who else got to remember, we're here to help the land developer and landowner. We're not, you know, it's not, our vision isn't always perfect, you know, and I hate, you know, I have to remind the board here that you serve people who live here, who own the property here. It's not, well, the village and just this little government. It's about the people and, you know, so you know, if somebody wants to have, you know, 2-bedroom apartments with 1 bath and that, or a duplex with 2 bedrooms, 1 bath and a small garage, you know, I guess that's what you get. And then, you know, people can afford an $800, you know, $1,000 a month rent instead of $1,500.
you know, I guess that's kind of one of my thought processes. I don't know if we have to overthink the square footage things at this level right now.
Well, we don't wanna overthink it, but we use that standard, right? That's consistent with what the community wants.
Yeah, I understand that.
Any other questions? Yeah,
I guess on that, of the R1 versus R2 versus R3, do you have percentage of what is in the current code that's going to remain R1 versus what percentage is R2 versus what percentage is R3 to, I mean, do we really have an issue? If it's consistent,
Yeah.
total land area left to develop,
Yeah.
it sounds like R3 is pretty much fully developed at this point.
Yeah, so we haven't done the map yet, that'll be part of the process, but just looking directly at our future land use map and the comp plan. We have about 17.1% of the village is identified as low density, so that'd be that R1 district. 1.8% is in the medium density, and that would be the R2 district. And just under 1% in the high density, and so, with some of these higher density districts, we are really looking at a small amount of land. Much of it is already developed. There is some undeveloped land in the medium density district. I think I've got some estimates here. So the high density residential district, and this is just on the future land use plan. We essentially have 1.5 undeveloped parcels. I don't have acreage, unfortunately. And then medium density, we have something in the range of, 21 total parcels in the village that fall within that medium density residential land use category that are not already developed. And so fairly small amount of land. I think there's one block of 40 acres, but for the most part, it's a little bit more scattered to that.
But the two family dwellings that we would be discussing would be in that 17%, correct?
Those would be in the 1.8%. Yeah. Yeah, so the R1 district is that 17%, that's this one. What we are recommending is single family dwellings exclusively. With allowing some accessory dwelling units, which is an item I'd like to ask some questions about here, a little bit later.
and just so everybody is reminded, there's limited sewer water service area that limits, I mean. This is huge, right?
Yeah.
Land wise, but it's all about where we can run sewer and water, and we are limited as to what's available right now. And that's what the comprehensive plan is kind of based on.
Yeah, and to be, to piggyback on that, 57.5% of the village is an agricultural future land use. That'll be zoned ag. It will be used for agricultural purposes. That's what's it gonna be. And then we have, another 5.5% in parks and recreation. 3.5% in overhead residential. So those are your residential parcels outside of the sewer service area. We've got a little bit of transitional land in between, but still the vast majority of the village is in what would be considered more of a preservation type of zoning district or land use category that will be converted into a zoning district here to this.
Any other questions? Comments? So like answer.
Thank you.
Well, you'll show someone's doctor, don't know. And maybe I'll wait till your questions, but, next questions around accessory dwelling units being conditional use. Or I think they should be a permitted use.
Perfect.
But if you have some questions first, maybe you can ask those first, maybe they'll answer those, so.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, if there's no more questions about like this residential structure, certainly we can spin back to it as we move through if there's more questions that come up or comments. But we can kind of move on and then we can get to Matt's question about ADUs. All right. Okay. So, there's a number of other changes we're recommending or topics that we're just trying to make sure we're addressing as part of this. We already talked about senior housing. Again, we've kind of identified planned development districts as that option for the village when there's other things that the village wants to take advantage of. the nice thing about land development districts, we don't want to be using them all the time, but if there's something that's a really good opportunity for the village, we don't want you to have to say no if it makes sense. And so this gives the opportunity to have a senior housing development or some, I don't know if it's tiny houses or whatever, I don't know if that's right for Harrison, but something like that, that just makes sense. There's a process to accomplish that. Outside of that, I already kind of addressed, increased flexibility in home-based business uses. What we're kind of proposing, we're still working on structuring this, is a little bit more of a tiered approach to approval. We're just trying to reduce the burden on staff and on these two committees and boards to approve every single one that comes by, really trying to pull out those uses that may have impacts on their neighbors. And those are the ones that will go forward to have a public process where things like, I want a plumbing business, I want to use my shed or my garage, and put a little office in there, and that's where I park my vehicles, and then we get up each morning, I take my truck and my supplies and I go to another site and work. There's no limit, there's limited impact on your neighbors. There should be a little bit easier process to get that approved. But if we're looking at something like a landscaping business where you're storing big piles of mulch and you have a backhoe and you have lots of equipment and you have, 10 or 15 employees coming to your house in the morning, we should have a higher level of approval required for that. And so we're building a structured approval process for those to make sure that only those more impactful uses are coming to this group, and there's an easier way for people who want to do the things that aren't really going to have any impact on their neighbors. And that just allows some larger variety in economic development and value added ag. We've kind of put agritourism into this, and so if you have a local farm and you want people to come out and do a corn maze or have a farm to table dinner or have educational classes, there's a process to do that. That allows people to make money on their farming, their agricultural products, but also have a little bit of value added to make a little bit better living. We're doing things like simplifying bulk standards. We had a good meeting with last week where we talked about, we don't necessarily need every set of bulk standards that the village has currently, and things like, if we have a lot coverage standard, we probably don't need to have the same types of limits on accessory structures. Currently, the code limits how large your accessory structures can be and limits the number of accessory structures you can have. We can kind of take some of those requirements away and have the same effect because they're overlapping and they're regulating the same things. And that's, hopefully to just make things a little bit easier to administer. There's a few other things we'll get into, like where we list uses and things that don't really matter. And then the other item I didn't actually put on the slide, but I did have on my discussion questions that I wrote down is about ADUs. So currently, the code doesn't allow ADUs as a conditional use. Pretty much anywhere there's a single family dwelling unit. However, some of the things we've heard is that's limited to like 600 square feet. There's some other standards in there about, requiring residents or requiring the occupant to be over 60 years old or disabled, and a few other things. And so there's ways that we can look to loosen some of those restrictions if that's appropriate. And allow a little bit greater number of accessory dwelling units to come into the village if that's something the village wants. And so I have the existing code here, but I knew Matt was gonna have some questions or some comments. And so I do want to just get the pulse of the group about how should we handle accessory dwelling units. Do we want to add a little bit more flexibility? Do we want to make the permitting process easier? Should we allow them to be larger? Those types of questions. So.
Well, go ahead. Trustee Lancaster.
Great, thank you.
So accessory dwelling units, I believe, is one of a really key opportunity that we have here to really address housing issues and kind of be a leader in addressing housing issues in Harrison. Trustee Baldwin's comment with senior housing, you certainly could have a a senior aspect to it where you may have a child that wants to take care of an elderly parent, for example. You also may have just a unrelated senior individual just wants a little smaller area to live in. Doesn't want to necessarily have an apartment, doesn't necessarily want to have a duplex. Very well taken